Good afternoon, good morning. I'm Melissa Sayer, your co-host of the Team Coaching Zone podcast. You're all very welcome. Today we have a very interesting topic learning conversation where we have a group of team coaches that are part of a team coaching community circle or a community of practice. And I came across this community of practice through my colleague, my friend, Colin Murphy, as he had convened this group of team coaches together. And I'll leave it to you to tell a little bit of the backstory and how this group evolved. And why I thought it would be great to have a community of practice of team coaches on is it is this emerging field for all of us where we are trying to look at different ways to enhance our team coaching skills. So there's supervision, there's community of practice, there's different courses that we can go on. And of course, the idea of a community of practice is, bringing together a group of people that, share an interest or a real passion in a certain topic, and creating a learning environment that allows that group to take its own form and shape its own learning. So I think we'll have lots of interesting things to talk about today, not just how that comes about in how we learn, how we grow and develop as coaches, but also how we bring that back into our own practice. And then, of course, when you bring any group together, the inevitable dynamics that starts to emerge in that group. So I'd like to begin by welcoming you all, just inviting each of you to introduce yourself to our listeners, say where you are, a little bit about your team coaching practice, and then we'll get into what I hope is a really great conversation. So Emer, would you like to kick us off, introduce yourself, say hello to our...
Thanks, Melissa. Lovely to be here and looking forward to the discussion. So my name is Emer O'Donnell. I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. I'm an executive and team coach since 2015. And for the last, 15 years, my work has been as a strategic growth consultant, which is a very fancy way of saying I work with leadership teams to help them figure out how to grow their businesses. So I spend all of my time meddling in other teams' businesses.
Lovely, Emer. Thank you. Who'd like to go next? Jen, would you like to?
I would. Thanks, Melissa. So I'm Jen Campion, also Dublin, Ireland, here today. And I've been working as an executive coach the last 5 years. And prior to that was a management consultant. So been working with teams a long time in various different capacities. But I suppose it's really in the last 2 years that I've kind of shifted my work with teams to be team coaching, say with a capital C, whereas maybe prior to that I was adding team coaching in as needed amongst other things. So yeah, that's where I am today.
Very, very welcome. And Mary, welcome to you.
Great to be here. So yeah, Mary Curtis and I too, I'm based in Dublin, and I work as an executive and a team coach. Very similar to Jen, I had been executive coaching and then did the diploma with Colin in Smurfit and really enjoyed the team coaching. So that's where I'm hoping to build a lot of my practice. I'm working with teams at the moment. Always fascinated about the story of teams. My background is media and communication. So there's always a story in a next chapter. So that's me.
Lovely, Mary. And Mark, we'll come to you and then I'll bounce to Colin, and then Colin can maybe get us rolling with a bit of contextualizing. Mark, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Melissa. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Cahalane. I'm also based in Dublin, so it's a community of practice from Dublin here today, obviously. Also trained in Smurfit with Colin. And my background prior to that, I've started in coaching for about 5 years as well. My background to that was very much in the corporate world, where I sat on the exco of a very large global entity and was very interested in the dynamics of very senior teams at that time and how they work and how they don't work. And that really got me interested in team coaching. So that's my background.
Fabulous. And it's great to bring that lens, and maybe we can kind of come back to how you're kind of maybe the person being coached or going through some of these experiences, and then bringing that into your own coaching work. Lovely. Colm, I guess you are a friend of the Team Coaching Zone podcast. I know a lot of our listeners will know you already. I know that in the next month or two, you're going to host the Team Coaching Zone podcast here for us. But that said, every week we have new listeners, so maybe you would introduce yourself and kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa and Krista, and hello to everybody, and hello to all the gang on the call, and to our learning community who aren't with us on this call. A big wave to them as well. So probably no prizes for guessing where I'm based. Also Dublin, Ireland. Background, I guess probably formally team coaching for about 9 years. I've been a program director of a university team coaching program that I think everybody in our community has been part of at one point. I'm also currently part of GTCI faculty, and have been a co-editor of the team coaching casebook. And yeah, that's me. Delighted to be here and sharing some of our stories and what we've got from the process.
Fabulous. And I think it would be great if you could put some shape and color around this whole idea of bringing together a group of team coaches into a community of practice, what your hopes, aims, aspirations were for bringing a group together like this.
Yeah, so I guess it would have been roughly this time last year, I think, and correct me, folks, if I get this wrong, but roughly this time last year, I was just finishing up, having spent a number of years being part of faculty at a university where, again, I would have met Emer and Mark and Mary and Jen and others. I think one thing I heard a lot of when you're delivering coaching, be it one-to-one or team, is there's always that question. The formal program is powerful. It almost forces us to delve into the skills and to meet, but that question of now what do we do? And often the question is, where do I go next for my CPD or development? So I was holding that question in my head. How do you continue to develop outside of a program other than just getting more experience? I guess there's something in my mind also of, I'd be interesting for the folks on the call to jump in here, but I often feel like with team coaching in particular, it can be quite an anxious learning experience. I mean, for you and I, Melissa, we've talked before about AOEC. There was some interesting dynamics where out of our depth, for many of us, we've really found coaching and we are getting competent and expert in that. And then we move into this team coaching space. I think it triggers a bit of that expert achiever mode in us. So I can often find that it can be an anxious program up until halfway point, and then we kind of relax. And so there was something about how to create a learning space that wasn't going to be so anxious, because I was going to be with people who already had some experience. There's also something about, when you are in a role, and it's different, I think, than the circle, but when you're in a faculty role of team coaching, you're never more than 4 team coaching engagements ahead of the participants. It's not like, okay, there's the odd few people who have years and years of experience, but we're all trying to figure this out. So that sense of this being evolving, the craft was kind of interesting as well for me and for others. And then the words describing it as a team coaching community circle. Community was that idea of there's no top and bottom here. We're all going to learn from each other. And it's, especially in Ireland, don't know about elsewhere, but it's still a kind of an emerging new community. And there's almost something like, in one way, we're competing against each other, but if we can all build our confidence and our delivery of team coaching and get into organizations, we're going to all benefit from it. So we are a community that wanted support from each other, but also to develop the idea of team coaching. And the circle very much came from all of our training and development at the university was always a big circle of chairs. So again, no top, no bottom, no hiding. And there was something in that circle, the power of the circle, where we could be stronger together than we could be apart. So that was some of the things. And I think, Melissa, you and I had to go at this previously through the lens of action learning
peer sets,
and that worked to a point, but this was something maybe that was breaking out of that structure as well, and maybe giving it more space. So we meet
Yeah.
for one day every quarter at this point in time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And maybe we'll come back to the differences of structuring an action learning peer set vis-a-vis, the true essence of a community of practice, which is remarkably quite different. I guess building on that column as well, you and I had over the years had many experiences where we had entered into supervision as a pair of team coaches that coach together, and that is useful, needed, but it only gets you so far as well. So was there something as well in your kind of, this is not supervision, this is, but part of it by its very nature can emerge as supervision by your sharing your casework, you're grappling with problems. Was that a part of it as well?
And even as you say that, I mean, I think a number of us on this call are still having conversations about how do we evolve the community of practice to the next iteration. So what we're doing now may not be the answer, but I guess supervision is absolutely, this is yes, and we do peer supervision as part of our time, but I think there was also something about having some space where we could bring an input or bring another perspective, or Jen was really helpful in actually challenging all of us to go off and pick some topics and go off and research them, be it team of teams or team dynamics, and bring our best thinking and share that. So supervision, yes, I reflect on my clients, on my practice, but I think this is also a space almost where we do a bit of knowledge sharing as well, but also maybe explore different things or bring some new
Try
thinking.
out experiential practice, and yeah, fabulous. I'm curious then to hear from Mary, Jen, whoever wants to kick us off about what were you meet once a quarter. I think it's for 3 hours every quarter, or is it for a full day? Full day, isn't it? Yeah, full day. So it's a big commitment. And then that's over a period of how many months? Is it 12?
12 months, yeah.
12 months, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then around, okay, well, I've signed up for this thing. What were your expectations going into it? What were your trepidations? What were you excited about? Just that whole experience of joining something new and joining a new group. So Jen, Mary, Mark, Emer, whoever wants to jump in.
We're all gone quiet. Yeah, I was going to, just before I go to the joining thing, I just wanted to pull on a thread that Colin mentioned that I think was particularly important for me in joining it. And that was the piece about who's the expert in the room. So we have all done, I don't think some of the guys are in the same cohort in the academic training, but we've all been through the same academic program on team coaching. And one of the things I always really liked about it was this kind of sense of something co-created was really important for me, because it kind of got to the point where I was getting, and this is my stuff, I'm very aware of that, but getting very triggered by this idea of expertise, and particularly in the team coaching space, because it's so emergent, like who has the right, certainly in Ireland anyway, I think it's the case, who has the right to call themselves an expert on this, because it's all quite new and quite dynamic. So I think that was one for me. And the other is the supervision piece is a little bit different to supervision. I always find one-to-one supervision, there's always a little bit of the supervisor knows best. They're more experienced. They're kind of sitting in a mentoring role, even though they're using coaching skills in the conversation. The supervision that we do in the group, in the circle together is real, what I would call real peer supervision. There's no expert. It's here's the case, and we're collectively trying to figure it out together, or using lots of different techniques, some of which are things that we might use with teams when we're working with them. So we're kind of getting to play with some of the tools and techniques with our own cases, if that makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense, yeah.
But it's about, for me, that piece going into this, and the bit that I'm really delighted that I'm getting out of it is that real, co-created space to work stuff through, because team coaching is complicated.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing behind that, Emer, is that there is no right ways. There's multiple ways, and let's explore all of these different multiple ways and see how that adds to our practice, gets us to reflect on our practice.
Challenges our thinking.
Challenges. I really love that. Maybe hear from Mary. I'm really curious about this whole like stepping it back, going in, arriving. I know I joined you one morning for an hour or an hour and a half, and you all gracefully welcomed me in to be part of it for a fleeting moment. I'm curious about, as you arrived into the center of town, going into this building, clearly you would have known some of the colleagues from your shared Smurfit background. Some were new to you. What was that like? Okay, well, I've signed up for this. What expectation did you have of it? What anxieties did you have? Do you recall kind of settling yourself into this new group? I'd just kind of love to hear about that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was very excited around and about the possibilities. I missed talking to people about teams, and I missed the conversations that you have with peers and colleagues when you're studying. And there was something for me about being part of a team again. And I thought this will be a really good adventure. I'm going in, as you said, I knew some people, I didn't know others. And also it felt very new. There was something new. It wasn't anything I'd come across before. It's not really group supervision. It's not one-to-one. And I liked the fact that we were all practitioners of a certain level, because for me, I felt that was going to raise the conversation and the bar, where you're speaking a language and everybody kind of knows what you mean or what you're talking about. And I'm just one of those people that would do this sort of thing and not work for years if I could, so
like the rest of us then. Yeah.
Bring it on,
Yeah. Lovely, Mary. Mark, anything that's kind of resonating, or a strand that you'd love to pull on, or where would you like to take the conversation next?
Yeah, I think the question you asked, Melissa, was very interesting with Mary. What was it like to go in and join the group? And what strikes me about that is the great thing about it, in many ways, it was exactly the same as our clients experience team coaching, and as our clients experience groups and how they show up in a group. And I found it particularly useful because you're working on team coaching assignments while this group and the community is meeting and working. So it really reminds you almost at the coalface what it's like to be part of a team, all the seen dynamics, all the unseen dynamics, and how am I when I show up in the group or in any group, and those interpersonal dynamics as well. So I found that particularly helpful, because I think questions going on for me, even though I knew many of the people within the group, the questions that were going on for me and others are the very same thoughts and feelings that our clients are having as they come into team coaching. Okay, we've all trained in it, so we have a good deal of knowledge on it, but it's very much emergent. But it is that being able to sit with the experience that clients and team clients and the dynamics they have and the uncertainty they have and the nervousness they have, the emotions they have, the triggers they have, I think was a very good way of road testing that and really being able to situate yourself alongside client assignments.
I think that's such a powerful reflection, because you're describing, it's such a human moment, isn't it? That moment, even if we do know a few people, but when we go into a group, where do we go as a person? What's the story that we're starting to tell ourselves about how we are in groups, what groups are about, and just to bring ourselves back to those moments is a really powerful tool within our coaching, because we're then going back to reminding ourselves of what must it be like for this new team that's coming in to meet their coach for the first time. I really, really like that. Jen, I see you nodding. Is that a thread you want to pick up? One thing that I want to pick up on is you challenging the group, and maybe how the group starts shaping its norms and all of that. But is there anything there that Mark was saying that you wanted to pull through?
Well, it all resonates as he describes it. I suppose to more go back to the question of that challenge of, can we take topics and have we kind of set it up so the morning is kind of, we've done some reading or exploring or listening to different material out there, but on a specific topic that we've chosen together. And for me, coming into the coaching circle was less about learning something new, because I'm also still signed up for 17 other courses as I do, but it's about kind of more digesting what I know and in that real sense of teams that I'm working with. So for me, the coaching circle is kind of a place where I can stay with what I already know, but kind of take it deeper, and to Emer's point, see it in a different way, in a different perspective, because we're talking about the same topic. We've all done our own research, we've shared it, but we're still talking about the same topic, and we're kind of reflecting how we'd use that in such different ways that it's really challenged me to see how I interpret the topic we've talked about, and maybe why I didn't look at it in that way, and I focused on this element of it. So it's kind of less about learning something new, but more deepening kind of what we already have.
And maybe you could say a bit more about that, Jen, because I recall the day that I was invited in, the topic du jour was about power and influence and power and politics, if I'm remembering correctly. And the group engaged in a great conversation about that, whether it was in plenary, triads, all different variations. But could you give a little bit of flavor for our listeners as to, like, how did you arrive even at this whole idea of, this is going to be a group where we have certain topics, we do pre-reading. So what were the kind of conversations that you had to start putting these kind of structures in place, I guess?
And obviously everyone else jump in, because this will be my memory and recollection of it. But I suppose Colm, being the convener, did kind of take a more of the leading role in that first session, and having us set norms for ourselves and our intentions for the group. And it was out of that, I suppose, one of the needs that I had wished for was around, can we really kind of together come on one specific topic? I do like the point of kind of this continuous emerging research and theory coming out, and it's one of those things I really enjoy, but I kind of only do it when there's a deadline or something I have to. So there's kind of the mutual accountability of, oh, it's on next week, I better start looking at this topic. So a bit of peer pressure coming in there. So that's kind of, I suppose, the point of Colm taking that more kind of leading us through, as he would as team coach in the early stage of us kind of forming. And I think then we've set ourselves up, again, I'll pass this back to the group for their opinion on it, that at different times, different one of us may take a more of a leading type role amongst us. But if it ever happens that we're kind of end up wandering or no one's taking the leading role, I think Colm always does kind of pick it back up. So there's someone there, but we definitely do have different times, and in the peer supervision, in the selecting of the topic or discussing the topic, different participants take that kind of leading role. I'd love to hear others' experience of that.
Yeah, I think it's back to the point I made earlier about there not being a kind of a someone in charge at the top of the group, and I think that as the sessions have gone on has become, sorry, Colm, less about the role of the convener and more about the group has started to take that, I guess, ownership of that itself, which I really like, because I and going back to Mark's point about, things that happen in the group being a mirror of what's going on for our clients, that piece around, the role of leadership in teams, not just being, well, the CEO is the one who drives all the conversation and traffic. You get much better performance out of a team when everybody in the team is stepping into to owning that. So I really like that piece about the way the group has, and even the conversations about what comes next. You know, there's been a couple of discussions about how do we, and it's not how does Colm, it's how do we, what do we want this to look like going, you know, now that we're almost at the end of a 12-month cycle. What do we want this to look like going forward?
And I guess that's then, it is the true essence of a community of practice, insofar as that's how community of practices are meant to evolve. But clearly somebody needs to convene to enable it to evolve. So Colm, I'm curious about your role at the start and what you've noticed about, you know, your role on day one, and how that's evolved for you, and what you've learned, you know, about yourself in terms of bringing together a group of team coaches to work in this way.
So I think it echoes what others are saying. There's probably more me being leading the initial one a bit more, crafting those conversations. I'm even just looking at the list of, we discussed how we wanted this group to be distinctive from other groups, because some of us are in group supervision, be it one-to-one or team coaching, or we're in various, I mean, we might be working with other team coaches at universities or elsewhere on other programs. So we've got a very curious group of people who are on many different programs. But we talked about the depth of learning. We talked about it being a place where we could be imperfect, and that felt really important as well, and a place for sharing and being experiential. So I think we set up some, and again, I think it probably does help. I kind of knew everybody, and there was maybe a sense of, we just got going a bit quicker because some of us knew each other as well. So there was almost, and we came from a similar background. I mean, there's a lot to be said that we had shared, even if not in the same cohort, an ethos of a university program or programs, where we kind of knew what to expect of each other. The psychological approach, there's a sense of a Gestalt background. So we weren't coming from vastly different backgrounds, which does help. And even culturally, I guess there's a danger we could be a bit too homogenous. It's definitely moved on, and even a dilemma for me right now. We're just about to finish our first year. We're talking about another running, maybe some new members. But one thing we haven't talked about is there's a slight elephant in the room here, that I get paid for this. So I'm charging the guys for hosting the room, for that. I'm paying. And now I'm doubting, what the heck is that about anymore? Because I think I could easily just withdraw right now, and this group has enough in it. I mean, it might be someone has to go book the room. So it's kind of interesting as well, as I listen in, is I'm less sure what my value add is. And that's a good thing. And maybe that also parallel processes being a team coach. There's a point of knowing when to get out of the way and not hang around. So I'm noticing that I'm still getting loads from learning and being a participant, but me needing to be that space. Maybe it's time for someone else to take on the role of convener, or find a new location for us, and maybe it needs to evolve. And again, that money, that paying to be there is something that may no longer be useful as well. So I don't have an answer, but that's kind of some of the stuff that I'm grappling with at the moment. And that could all be very positive. It could be that we've got enough going that we're not going to fall off, that we'll keep going, but in a different shape, which I think is at the heart of what we try and do as team coaches.
Which is healthy in any case, right? That groups are emerging and evolving to new shapes, new forms, so on and so forth. Just for our listeners, Colm, were there any kind of, you know, if somebody's listening out there and thought, oh, I might like to set up my own community circle or community of practice, not necessarily around team coaching. I guess that's the whole beauty of it. It's around this shared interest and shared passion for a certain topic that you can learn. Were there some kind of key principles that you'd like to share as to, like, the number of people, just how you would even invite somebody into, is this something that you think might be useful? Any kind of key tips if somebody wanted to do it?
And there is a parallel group that I run, which is more aimed at individual. So we've got two communities in a way. yet to let them know about each other and contaminate each other. But there's a team coaching group, and there's also a group which is more focused on one-to-one coaching. I mean, none of this is right. I think there was a sense of, I was trying to be transparent. So I reached out to my network. So people who I thought, had an interest, had a level of practice. So I was looking for people who had experience, as opposed to trying to hold vastly different needs. So there is something about just thinking about who you're inviting. I was trying to be transparent on what I thought the need was, and invited just a sense of, here's what I'm thinking. Are you interested? So trying to be transparent on that. The venue feels important. I mean, again, we've talked about the circle. So trying to pick, again, different countries will be different, but there was something about not being a hotel, because that has its own connotations and clunkiness and hotel service. There's something about it being a central venue, but it was a fresh space for us all. Again, a big circle of chairs. What else was on my mind? I mean, I probably, with the team coaching, because it's a smaller market, probably always realized there's only going to be about, I think there's 10 of us plus myself, 11. So it was going to be 10 to 12. And with the other coaching community, it's 12. So I think there's something about wanting it to be big enough that we don't all make every session. And so if there's one or two of us missing, there's enough of a quorum to continue the conversation and to reach out. And at the same time, if it's 1 to 24 type thing, or there's 24 of us, I think we're not going to get contact with each other, because I'm hoping everybody in the community group is connecting with each other. We also began to do a bit of Google Drive stuff that, based on Jen's kind of idea of let's go research, there's a place for us to share things. And I've no doubt, and I don't need to be in it, but I can already hear there's lots of other conversations in pairs or trios or quartets that go on within the group. And so I think, as you say, the group has its own life outside of this that is generated. So I don't know if the others have any thoughts about any other lessons we could have learned or passed on to others, but they were just some thoughts.
There's one thing you said that really landed for me, because I've been part of other groups, as most of us have, of the time. And Melissa, you mentioned earlier on that action learning set piece that we did. And I think one of the things, if I was to put the two in parallel beside each other, well, one that was virtual and this is in person. So that definitely is a big, significant difference. But I think for me, the significant difference is the level of experience of the people in the room. So there's a depth, or I guess you obviously don't want to be too homogenous a group, but you also don't want someone who's never been a team coach. There's something for me about the comfort of knowing that if I bring a kind of a supervision type topic, or I want to bounce something around with the group and get a viewpoint on it, that I'm doing it with people who can give me useful perspectives and contribute to that. And that needs a depth of experience. And I think if you were in a very inexperienced, if that level of experience wasn't quite right, I think that might shift something. So there was something about that shared level of experience and shared background. Colin mentioned the Gestalt and the psychological
and the training that you had,
and the training, because we'd all been through the same thing. So we all go to a place.
There's that starting point.
That's
I think there was to name the differences between us, because of the values and the learning is the differences. So one or two are working in organizations, so they're taking on a more internal coach role. There's a few of us working independently, a couple of us working in our team coaching role, but for an organization. So I think there's still enough difference, to have that breadth. And obviously our styles are different, and presence in what we bring. But I think, you do have to have a strength of some common factors enough to get it lifted off the ground in a quick enough way, because we're only meeting once a quarter. So it had to have enough behind it kind of to get us going.
Just add to that, Jen, the styles being different, you also get to know each other sufficiently well to know where individual strengths lie. So I mightn't be the best on models at times. For example, I had a conversation earlier this week with Mary. I was talking back into models, maybe more into the executive coaching side of things for a particular dynamic I was coming against. So you get to see, different styles, absolutely, but also strengths of career of origin and how team coaching builds on that and gives a unique perspective and capability and capacity, but also particular strengths in knowledge of particular aspects of team coaching, which outside the circle can be very, very helpful, and as we discussed, topics.
And it encourages you then, Mark, as well, to be a little bit more brave and courageous with what you might try out in your own practice when you're kind of being absorbed in these experiences and seeing that, you know, others are willing to be experiential, try something out, and okay, that imperfect idea, I really love that. That was one thing that, as I was hot-footing it up the road after I left you guys that morning, like, that really resonated and stuck with me, that it's not about coming into this group and, you know, trying to present yourself as the perfect team coach. So I really like that whole experiential side of what you guys are describing as well. And I'm wondering, do any of you have a story about a courageous moment where you tried out something new with a client, and what that was like, and what things have you brought back into your practice, and what are you noticing about that?
I might just to offer two things briefly. One, you know, in terms of, I said it earlier on, in terms of road testing things, I remember, I think Jen brought a particular client issue and we worked it through. We did a fishbowl exercise on it. It was incredibly real. It was incredibly tangible, and there was a degree of vulnerability for us all in the room, and that felt sense of what was going on. And I don't want to go into the details of Jen's client, but I think, Jen, you went on and then subsequently tried that issue out with the client. I know for myself, I have become much more creative, and coming from a very corporate background, creativity isn't always the first thing you would think of for a leadership team. But I've certainly become much more creative in some of the exercises. I would have to say, I would judge my team very well in terms of, before some of them I would try, but I've certainly become more creative in some of the approaches, and I've watched the dynamic shift with the teams as this group has given me confidence to try some of those things that I wouldn't naturally lean towards, and that has changed my own capacity as a team coach, my own openness as a team coach, and it has also changed the dynamics with some of the teams I'm working with.
I really like that, and I don't want to put you on the spot and not the specifics of the client, but any kind of example is something you tried out or anything you'd like to share?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that, because I didn't. I have disaster. I have one disaster, which I certainly don't want. And I misjudged that client very significantly, and that was a chastening experience. It can be the very simple things. I was thinking there, when you come from the really simple things, like an opening round. There's not. When you do that with, and that's so simple, obviously, and sitting in a circle. When you come from a straight-laced corporate background, well, you might sit in a circle, but there's a very clear hierarchy, and you don't do opening rounds. And even empowering clients to begin to work that way. I know an exco who now always check in for every meeting, and that's something they would never have done before. And it's obviously very simple. So what are they showing up with, and how are they, and checking out? Now that's something very, very simple. But it's those small little things that I think shift dynamics within teams, as well as the very substantive work we do. And I don't know that I'm brave enough to go into the others in terms of the absolute.
No, absolutely not. But it resonates with what Colin was saying earlier around the power of the circle, because even with that opening round, sometimes, certainly I've had experiences where leadership teams are completely discombobulated when they walk into the room and they realize that there's not a boardroom table there to hide behind, or where's all the PowerPoints we were hoping for. So the power of that circle and doing that opening round, immediately we're saying something's different here. This is going to be a bit different. Any other? Go on,
I've become known as the girl who gets rid of the tables.
Yeah. I think it also disrupts every hotel or organization, or every venue.
What do you mean you want the tables taken out of the room? Yeah.
So if we got paid a rate from shifting furniture as team coaches, I think I could probably double my beneficial impact in this as well. But yeah, it's some of the fun. But you do know, you've asked for a circle of chairs, no screen, no projector, and you walk in. It's the benefit of arriving early to find the table stuck in the middle, and so I think it discombobulates the venues as much as the team, I think.
And sometimes it's immovable, right? And you just have to work with it. This is too heavy to move, or and off you go, and you must figure out different ways to create your circle of trust. I love that, Mark. Thanks for sharing. Any other experiential stories that folks want to share, including you, Colm, of things that emerge from the group and you kind of tried it with your clients?
I think.
Good.
Sorry, go on. Well, I think what's been very powerful for me is reminding myself of the importance of me as a coach in my process, because I become distracted by the diagnostics and the interventions, and there's something about remembering why I'm a coach and remembering who I am in the room and remembering how I'm going to meet the team. So it's almost, there's a lot of it is stripped back for me, because there are those very honest conversations that happen, and they happen throughout the day. We arrive in at 9:30 and we just talk all day, even in the breaks, even during coffee. It's all about the work that we're doing. So that, I think the community has given me the permission to remember why I'm doing this in the first place, and not to forget the basic tenets that are needed as a coach.
Yeah. It parallels, I think, very nicely with what Mark was saying. It's connecting us back to those human moments. And if we're not able to connect back to those ourselves, how are we actually able to do good work with teams and with our clients?
I'd echo Mary's point on that reminder thing. I had one at the last session. You could very easy, when you're going in front of a team, you're worrying about the circle and where the tables are, and you're worrying about what interventions you're going to use and what exercises have you got planned for the team. We talk about the emergent versus not with team coaching can be challenging to manage. And sometimes at the last session, I got a reminder of, what role am I being asked to play in this particular, was a case of mine we were working through. And that's really stuck with me. That's not new news. No one, it's not that that's a phrase that I've never heard before and that I haven't come across. But you forget. And it is something about that reminder of things that you might have once done intuitively and you slip out of over time. The circle kind of pulling you back and going, hang on a second, what are you doing here, and why are you showing up that way for the team? That you go, God, I hadn't even noticed I'd slipped into that because I'm inside it. So there's something about the circle being a really useful tool to help you look at how you are with the team from the outside in. That is really hard to do. And I'm not sure in a one-to-one supervision that you would necessarily.
Well, you don't get that same lived experience of a group dynamic.
Exactly.
That enables such awareness. And I'm a firm believer that we need to have those experiences in order to be able to catch ourselves in the moment when we're working with teams, because then we're not reflecting back. We're not doing the post-match analysis of
Doing it in the moment.
We're starting then to catch it a little bit more as it's happening in the room, and that's a game changer in our coaching. And it's not a race any of us will ever run. I feel like as long as we're coaching, we're always going to be running that race of trying to catch those little moments of, there's my little angel friend again that's been helpful. Oh God, there's my devil that has not been so helpful. And how do we work with that? Colm, it sounded like you had also something you were going to share around something you tried out with a group.
Yeah, just tried it out last week. So when you joined us, I think it was back in February, we had gone off and researched the idea of power dynamics. And one of the things in that panic of, I'm going to see everybody in a week's time, I better do something, I finally began to read some of David Cantor's work, Reading the Room, and this idea of the different roles where watching teams kind of take those different roles of who moves. And then what happens is there a follower or an objector or a bystander. And just last week, I was working with a team of 3 who really struggle. There's lots of dynamics, lots of maybe competing commitments, even a bit of who's going to be the next person at the senior role. But they're having real challenge, having collaborative, beneficial conversations, and even using that model of it was interesting. I met them for contracting, and of course all the dynamics came out, but I waited till I got to be formally with them, say, can I just say that before we start, here's what I saw last time, lack of listening, lack of building on the ideas, interrupting, let's just work on those. And then we let it go. And we did a bit of Cape Cod process where myself and the other team coach, an internal person, let them go after a project issue and then checked in. But it was interesting watching one person be a bystander, didn't say anything, and then hit one of the other teams with move, this thing, and you said that, and then you did that, and your team does that. And then watching this other person almost reel from all of the moves he's throwing at her, and her stepping into object on each one, and then calling that out. So I found that really, that was the first time I got to actually use it live in the room. And I wouldn't have been thinking about it other than that it was something that we researched together. So there's a bit of an application. May have taken me 3 months to actually figure it all out or get to use it, but it was somewhere in the back of my head.
It was there, and it came into when you needed it. For some of our listeners that may not be familiar with the Cape Cod model, Colm, could you just give a little bit of color to what you mean by that?
Yeah, and I may not know what I mean, but it was something that you and I would have seen John Leary Joyce and Hilary Lyons and Peter Hawkins use, which is, and I may be destroying a very sophisticated process, but we've used it a few times where letting the team get into their rhythm and have a conversation and get into all the dynamics, but having a timeout. So usually agreeing with your coach, okay, let's let it go for 10 minutes. Now I'm going to stop. And the way I think you and I have adapted to Melissa is that the first intervention, we just time out and go, we have a conversation, the 2 coaches saying, what's the one thing this team is doing really well? And the team kind of go, well, why are you interrupting us? And why are you talking about us? But you just share that 1 or 2 observations. This is what they're doing well. And then you say, okay, away you go, keep going. We're not going to debrief that and see, does that land somewhere? And then another 10 or 15 minutes later, we might do another timeout and we'd go, so what's something they're doing well and what's something else you might encourage them to do differently? So it's just an observation process. It means that we're not constantly interrupting and we're just giving them little bites of things because we don't want to overwhelm them with all this information. And then you might even go a third time and again, observe one positive and one other thing to shift. So it's just, as far as I understand it, just a bit of a process, observation process tool.
Yeah, I had an experience with it just before Christmas where I was in a room with a very senior leadership team and my team coach partner, and we started engaging in this Cape Cod model around some really toxic dynamics that were going on. And of course, these dynamics had emerged in the the data analysis and had been shared back to the team in an appropriate way. And of course, everyone was shocked about these dynamics. And then, of course, it starts to play out live in the room, the exact dynamics that everyone is shocked by. And so we engaged in the conversation. And the coach that I was working with had kind of, it was their first time trying this out. And when I finished speaking and we turned back into the room, one of the team members said, "Oh, that was very skillfully done." Now, get back to this argument we were just having. And I remember, I was kind of so shocked and taken by it. Like it was one of those moments where I just didn't have the wherewithal to know how to respond, if that makes sense. There were other opportunities throughout the day, and we eventually got there, but it was just that moment of, that was very, very skillfully done. And it was like complete, great, but now I'm going to get back to
arguing with somebody else. Yeah,
it's a big argument that we're having. So, colleagues, I'm recognizing we've 9 minutes. That's always the thing I find with these learning conversations. They emerge, they unfold, and you think an hour is a lot of time, and it flies by. So I just maybe, Jen, start with you, pass the baton around to others. I heard in the conversation that you are coming towards the end of your first chapter of being this community of practice. So you've one more session to go in June. And then you're kind of starting to figure out what will the next evolution of this group be. And even if the group continues in its current form, it's still the end of a chapter, and there's there's a process that goes with bringing an ending to something. So I'm just curious about, what are you thinking about that? What are you hoping for? What are your expectations of when groups and chapters kind of put a punctuation into the system?
I think I was probably one of the ones to start to kind of go, how can we do it differently or change it up for next year? But I think from even this conversation today, actually sometimes just keeping it simple and keeping it as is will allow the kind of the depth of learning to go deeper. So sometimes maybe I'm trying to go to the activity to distract from the having to go deeper. So that's kind of what's come out for me today. But I haven't engaged my mind too much in the last session because it's still a month away, and the formal ending. So that's where I'm at. And maybe I'll pass to Mary.
Yes. So one thing that's been interesting about the year is that how we have worked with Colm has changed. So there was a mind shift for me when he moved from being our lecturer to being part of the circle. So that was very interesting as something that kind of happened, and it was great, but it took a little bit of time to go, oh, it's slightly different, so
This feels different.
Feels different, and it feels great. Actually, it felt it really, the dynamic was just very different. It was really nice. I of course want everything to stay the same. I don't want anybody to leave the circle. I really like everybody. I want no new people,
no changes,
and I just want us to go on as we are, because I feel it's working so well. I really enjoy the people, the group, it's fun. I love the challenges. I love the different lenses, the different perspectives. So it's a source of great joy, actually. So I personally wouldn't like anything to change.
Lovely.
Mark.
Thank you. I don't know how I am with the ending, because I don't really, I think back to the experience when I started on the academic route of coaching and really feeling an absence when that came to an end. And then the team coaching and the academic side, when that came to an end, there was an absence. But the circle emerged. So, I don't know that are there ever really hard endings? I am certainly more open to change and evolution than Mary. I like everyone. I have got to know everyone pretty well, and I have got to know myself well, even better through it. But I'm quite happy for it to evolve, and I'm absolutely sure it will evolve in a way that we can all feel comfortable with.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, sorry, and Emer, I beg your pardon.
No problem. Seeing as we're doing official baton passing,
Yes.
I think my reflection on it, and I mentioned this to Mary over lunch a few weeks ago, was I'm just not ready for it to end yet. So whilst our official kind of last one in the current, what we've contracted for, is coming up in June, as has been mentioned, I'm definitely, I've also had a mind shift away from this being a, something I'm doing because it's something Colm set up and organized, to being something I'd like to continue to be part of, because I'm getting something out of the circle. So the circle has emerged as a thing, I think, that wasn't there at the start, even though it was called a community circle at the start. It has become something that it wasn't, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Yeah,
ready
it's
for
like,
that to finish yet.
Team and name only, community circle and name only, and then of course it has
And then
to
it becomes
evolve.
a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we a real team? Are we a real circle? We're probably a real circle now. So I'm not ready for that to stop, because it feels like we've only just got there, that kind of way. So
Yeah, beautiful. Colm, what's top of mind for you?
Well, even, and again, thank you for Krista and yourself for inviting us on, because we even had a conversation. One of our last circles was, what would we talk about on a podcast? Or so that even tightened the circle, because I think it was an interesting thing of like, what the heck is this? And what would we be offering back? Because one of our distinctions is we want to be impactful, and hopefully again it's maybe got people thinking about what they could set up or join. So I think the podcast itself and thinking about this podcast has maybe helped us identify what is rich in it, and what might need to be changed. What's going on for me? I think there's also, and this group, I mean, you can see it, right? We're really mature, self-developed people, but I'm also very appreciative that as the community have kind of asked those questions about, do we want to change the shape of it? They've also reached out and said, but it needs to meet your needs as well. And that's an interesting question. What are my needs now? They're probably different than a year ago. And if it was smaller sessions and more regular, is that meeting my needs? So they've helped me go through a period of reflection of, well, what do I want? And that may just mean me changing role or doing something different. But that's what I love about the circle, I guess, is the awareness gets reverberated around the circle. So as we think about the circle, we're also reflecting on ourselves, or I'm reflecting on my role. So I'm very appreciative of the group kind of paying attention to my needs and all of this as well. So there's a lot of respect in this, which I think really helps.
Yeah, it really comes across, and it very much so came across the day that I was in. And of course, we don't even have the full group here. I remember you walking me out of the building that day and me saying, "Oh, I'd love to have you guys on the podcast. Would you float it with the group?" So I'm so glad you took me up on this invitation. I'm also conscious of, what you said there, Colm, about how this evolves. So from where you started is not kind of where you've ended up in terms of your own thinking, and paying attention, importantly, to your own needs. And again, it all parallels into the work we do, the needs that's going on in the team. David Boogie, who's in your community of practice, I think 12, 18 months ago, I'd set up a community of practice in Trinity College Dublin, and David now took on the baton of taking that community of practice forward. And it reminds me of the comparison between action learning sets and community of practice, and the difference around the power dynamics. Whilst action learning peer sets serve a function and serve a form, and they are useful, it's a very, very different experience And I think that's also reflected in the conversation that we've had today. It just felt like this natural flowing thing that just evolved and emerged. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here, for making the time, for sharing some fabulous insights, principles, ideas for others out there that might want to set up their own community of practice, community circle. I see one of the comments is, this is the true essence of what a learning circle is, and food for thought. I feel compelled to, I don't know why, but I feel compelled to give Emer the final word. So, Emer, would you like to close us out and wrap us up with this beautiful?
No, you just put me under complete pressure.
Can we
I
not
have no
vote
idea
on
what
this?
to say. No, I'd like to thank Melissa and Krista for inviting us to join. I think, as Colm said, the conversation about what would we talk about on the podcast was another forming moment of the circle. So thank you for that opportunity. And look, it's just great it's a privilege to be able to spend the time with people like the group that's on the call today, talking about what's going on with their work with teams.
Well, thank you again for allowing me to be a tiny part of it, and for being with us here today. Colm will be back on again. He's going to get sick of us now going from the team coaching zone. Stop. But we look forward to having you back on again soon. And have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks for having us, Melissa.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Have a lovely weekend.
Bye.
How do I?